A return to growth and creating jobs in sustainable industries are the key challenges facing Europe's politicians at the start of this new decade. In plenary in Strasbourg this week, MEPs voted on a resolution on the EU's blueprint for future economic development, known as EU 2020.
This is a Commission proposal that sets out ways to stimulate growth and create jobs over the coming decade in order to make Europe's economy stronger and better able to resist future shocks. It replaces the Lisbon strategy, the ambitious but ultimately flawed plan that sought to make the EU the world's most competitive economy by this year. Among the key priorities for EU 2020 are enhancing innovation and education, protecting the environment, and improving access to labour markets. But this new strategy comes on the back of the worst economic crisis for decades. And given the failure of the Lisbon strategy, EPP Group Chairman Joseph Daul was positive but cautious about embracing the Commission's plan.
Look how many jobs we plan to create under the Lisbon strategy. And how many were actually created? Really very few. So the EU 2020 strategy is okay, but it must be a strategy discussed fully with the member states and analyzed year by year to see what's been achieved. We are not going to create a big philosophy about this. So for EU 2020 we will of course have rules, but the strategy needs to be pursued differently. I must admit I was very taken in by the Lisbon strategy. It's true that we had many dreams and did a lot of work. And if you look at the results today, well, we all know what happened.
The EPP Group has taken the lead within the Parliament on confronting the crisis and developing a vision for the way forward. In particular, the group has expressed firm support for small and medium-sized enterprises, which need help and resources to recover from the downturn. Dutch MEP Corien Wortmann-Kool is our group's spokesman on the EU 2020 strategy.
We really welcome the 2020 strategy because in this time of crisis we have growing unemployment in our European countries and we want to solve this problem. So we want to enable our SMEs to be stronger because these are the motor of our economy, and we want to strengthen our social market economy in order to have a better future for our European citizens. And we are so happy that this is in the heart of the 2020 strategy of the European Commission.
The resolution was approved by the Parliament, but now MEPs are looking to the Commission and Member States to put their words into action.
Visitors to the EU from third countries on short-stay visas are allowed to move freely within the Schengen Area. But the same is not true for those on long-stay visas, who are subject to passport checks and visa requirements.
The inconsistency affects students who come to the EU to complete PhDs, for example, making it difficult for them to travel to neighboring countries to complete their research. The EU also loses out on the expertise of visiting scientists from the USA, India, Brazil and many other places who can't travel to attend conferences and seminars. The restriction damages the concept of a Europe without internal borders, says Portuguese member Carlos Coelho, author of a report on extending free movement rights within the Schengen area. Ideally, Member States should convert long-stay visas into residence permits that allow their holders to move freely in the Schengen area. But there are frequently considerable delays in carrying out this process. And in some Member States, the conversion never happens at all. There was near unanimous consensus on Coelho's report in plenary. He proposes applying the same conditions to the rights of long-stay visa holders as to those with residence permits.
The amendments that I proposed and were supported by the majority of the members of the LIBE committee contribute to solving the problem without losing the levels of security in the Schengen area. An obligation obviously to consult the Schengen information system when member states are granting a long-stay visa is exactly the same process as goes for those third country nationals who have a residence permit.
The requirement for registration in a central system and systematic checks improves the security of the visa granting process as well as allowing third country nationals with a long-stay visa to travel to other EU member states for 3 months in any 6-month period. The report also shortens the validity of long-stay visas to 1 year, following which member states would be obliged to issue a residence permit. A new community code on visas is due to enter into force next month. It abolishes a stopgap visa that temporarily allowed long-stay visa holders to move around the EU freely, making the change in this proposal, as Mr. Coelho stressed, even more urgent.
We'd like to urge the Presidency to make sure that the regulation does come into force between now and the 5th of April 2010. We need this regulation because in that way we will avoid having a legal void.
10 years after the implementation of the Common Security and Defence Policy, the European Parliament is pushing for action to improve its efficiency. A debate in plenary on the topic was led by EPP group members Gabriele Albertini and Arnaud Danjean.
All the major political groups in Parliament called on the newly appointed High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, Catherine Ashton, to extend and improve cooperation with the elected representatives of European citizens. French MEP Arnaud Danjean underlined the importance of this cooperation in enhancing the EU's credibility on the international scene.
In this context, the aim of the report is not so much to fix a doctrine as to deliver a roadmap which will evolve for the new institutions being set up, who have to learn to work together to make the EU credible, efficient and visible in the area of security and defence. In this regard, greater responsibility for the European Parliament in these sensitive areas is indispensable for legitimizing a policy whose main aim is to safeguard the security of European citizens.
The report focuses on the significant reforms introduced in the area of security and defence policy with the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty. It highlights where the effectiveness of EU efforts should be improved and emphasises parliamentary powers in supervising the common security and defence policy. Arnaud Danjean, author of the report, pointed out that the policy serves European citizens.
The European security strategy and the common security and defence policy serve European citizens, guaranteeing and improving their safety. This political ambition is not superfluous. It corresponds to a need for our continent to safeguard its own security, but also to contribute to the stability of the world around us, to face the crises and threats that develop in our surroundings. Beyond the classical armed conflicts that persist near our borders, Europe must be able to state its interests and defend them when faced with new threats. I'm thinking in particular of piracy or cybercrime.
MEPs also approved a resolution condemning the death of Cuban political prisoner Orlando Zapata, who died following his 86-day hunger strike in protest at the conditions of his detention. The resolution proposed by the EPP group demands the immediate and unconditional release of all political prisoners. It also asked the High Representative for EU Foreign Policy, Catherine Ashton, to open a dialogue with civil society and democratic opposition forces on the island. As EPP group spokesman in the debate, José Ignacio Salafranca said the resolution shows Parliament joining forces with those inside Cuba crying for freedom.
Sadly, we will no longer hear the voice of Orlando Zapata, but soon we will hear the voices of many other Cubans. In the meantime, President, this Parliament, that represents 500 million citizens from 27 member states, must echo loudly and clearly this unstoppable cry for liberty from the beloved island of Cuba.
Alto y claro de ese grito ya imparable de libertad que nos llega de la querida isla de Cuba.
That's all for this session, but we'll be back next month with more news from plenary. To keep up to date in the meantime, visit our website, eppgroup.eu. Thanks for watching.